We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
with global pals. It's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita
And Ellen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Theater podcast, the podcast where we talk about
everything theater. Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Zahn.
And I am Ellen Cribbs, and I'm honored to say that this episode is sponsored by Harbinger Theater. They are doing a production of The Agony and the Agony. It's a near unprecedented collaboration between a college and a community theater. Union College and Harbinger are doing this show by Nikki Silver. A playwright, Richard Aglow, joins any 12-step group just to meet people and is finally starting to write a play. And that's when the fun and trouble begin. Sexual duplicity, blackmail, and the ghost of Nathan Leopold converge on the Upper West Side as our characters, who may be short on talent but long on zeal, scratch, claw, and scheme for their piece of the theatrical pie. It runs December 8th through the 17th at the Ullman Theater at the Union College campus. Tickets are $15 on Eventbrite, and there is a free preview on December 7th at 7:30 p.m. So check it out.
It sounds like it's going to be great. And, you know, just the title, doesn't that sound sort of like life during the holidays, the agony and the agony?
Definitely.
I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I hope everybody did. My contention when people say, so how was it? I go, it's great. It was wonderful. The family's still talking to each other.
Absolutely.
You know, we've got a really interesting show for you tonight. And, you know, I've just got to say, I had met a friend for a beverage, and there were a few gentlemen sitting nearby, and we got talking. And I explained, you know, about the podcast and what the topic was tonight. And all three fellas took down the details of the podcast because they were all three gentlemen of an era, and I'll get to that. And it really speaks to them. You know, as we've talked a lot on this podcast about finding a young audience because so much of the audience is beginning to age out. But how do you even best engage the mature audience? And that's something that WAM Theatre, when Arts and Activism Meet, is the theater, and over in the Berkshires. And our guests tonight are Talya Kingston and Kaia Jackson. And good to have you with us.
Thank you for having us.
So the key to this, what you're doing, you do a lot of theater, and it's theater for gender equity and theater for philanthropy. And I guess since 2010, the theater has donated over $80,000 to 19 global and local organizations. I mean, things like, you know, for girls' education, teen pregnancy prevention, sexual trafficking awareness, midwifery training. These are not things you think theater, I'm just going to go and be entertained. Well, this is entertainment with a conscience, entertainment with a bigger purpose. And now, for a couple of years, you've been doing the Elder Ensemble. So take it away. And I know this is for folks, you know, this is the Medicare crowd.
Right. Shall I start, Kaia?
Please, Kaia.
Yes, please.
So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you again for having us. Yes, as you said, we're from WAM Theatre. We're going into our 14th season as a professional theatre based in the Berkshires that operates at the intersection of arts and activism. And what that means, as you said, is initially Kristin van Ginhoven, who is our co-founder and is still our artistic director, had this idea that she would put on a show and give away the proceeds to causes that support women and girls globally, something that connects to the theme of the show. So that's been going on for quite a while, and we focus on shows by women and that center female characters, simply because we saw when you look at the programming across the board of theatres across the country, it tends to skew towards male characters, and that has a knock-on effect in how women see themselves, how girls see themselves as potentially supporting roles rather than protagonists in the story. So there's a bunch of like social activism in that. But then Kristen is also an educator, and very early on started a what we then called a girls ensemble for teenage girls to devise theatre, again as kind of an empowerment technique to create theatre performances that told their stories in their own voices. And that was really popular, and that was for young people ages 13 to 18, and that's still going on. But then we had a lot of our older audience members who usher for us, who come to our shows, who are just great members of our WAMily, as we call it, who were saying, but we want in on that fun. We want to do creative stuff with you as well. And so about 4 years now, we just had a interest meeting, like whoever wants to. It's for women over 65 specifically, and we were overwhelmed by the response. And we had an incredible time creating devised theatre with a group of women over 65 that really, by devised theatre, we mean we start without a script. We start with just the people in the room, and they bring their stories, they bring their music, they bring their poetry, they bring all this stuff in, and we start to sort of hone it and create an ensemble and slowly create something that we showcase out. And then we did an ensemble that brought our teens and our elders together into an intergenerational ensemble, and it was getting a lot of steam, and people were really excited about it. And then, of course, COVID hit, and so we were pushed onto Zoom, and we did our best with Zoom. We created on Zoom, we devised on Zoom, but it's not quite the same as having people in the room. The power of actually creating together in person, that's really what we are all about in theatre. And so I'm thrilled to say that Kaia, who just started with us as Director of Community Engagement, has picked up the mantle and is reforming the Elder Ensemble this coming year.
And Kaia, you're going to be co-facilitating that Elder Ensemble this year.
Yes, that's correct.
So, is there a fee? Do you have to pay to get into this? Do you have to audition for this? Do you have to have theatrical experience? How does one become part of the Elder Ensemble?
Excellent question. So the answer to all of those questions is no. There are none of those prerequisites. We feel very strongly that folks without a theater background have a story to share, have many stories to share, and many gifts through which they can share those. And I think it's really a special opportunity when a group of women come together who have diverse gifts and experiences and skill sets. Some of them have done theater and performance or are professional musicians or writers, and some of them are not. I think there's something really special when they can witness each other in their strengths. And I think that can also help to draw out sometimes secret, unknown talents that people have just been sitting on without knowing it.
But do you have to limit it? You could have, what if you have 100 people who apply? How does one get selected to go? You're like, please, 100.
Well, then we're going to have a big party at the WAM Hub in Lenox, the church basement. But that's a great question. In my experience in community-based theater and ensemble-based theater, things tend to be somewhat self-selecting. I think that sometimes things can start a little bit bigger, and as time goes on, as the parameters are set, as the container develops and relationships start to build, I think sometimes there's an inner knowing that people come with, and I always encourage people to check in with themselves to make sure that the experience is aligned with what they're wanting. So I'm not particularly concerned. I will say we had a lot of interest at our recent meet and greet, which was awesome. There's a lot of energy. It seems like there's been a lot of hunger to regather for those women who already participated, and they're ready to like pick up where y'all left off a few years ago, and go full steam ahead with a potential intergenerational collaboration. So yeah, the energy is there, and I just have faith that we'll make space for all of it. But there is, maybe Talya, there is a cap that you said at some point, and I'm just trusting that the people who need to be there will be there.
So how long does it, so when does it start? So let's just say we decide, you know, somebody who's 65 plus wants to do this. They're hearing this and they go, you know, that talks to me. Let's get into the nuts and bolts. When do you have to apply by? When does it start? How long does it run? Where do I stay?
Right. So I understand this to be an opportunity that's really geared towards local residents. And so folks, some of whom live at a retirement home just within a mile radius, some of whom live quite a bit further just in the larger Berkshire region, who are willing and able to commute. And so the Berkshire region is actually quite large. There's North County and South County and Central County. And so I think that to have it be locally based is still inclusive of people from a lot of different places within the Berkshires. And in terms of just thinking through the logistics and the timeline, so we had an initial meet and greet that wasn't required to participate. And now we're just in the process of taking all the feedback that we received from participants and that came in from our Google form for those who couldn't be there, and just starting to synthesize that to make a more concrete plan of the nuts and bolts, the when it starts, how long, how many times a week, all of that. So I can't publicly reveal any of those because they're still in process internally, but those will be forthcoming, and we'll have a lot of transparent communication within our newsletter, which anybody's welcome to subscribe to, and anybody's also welcome to follow up with myself or with Talya afterwards if they're curious and want to learn more.
And what does a typical session look like? I'm thinking of my mother-in-law has a drama club at her senior living area, and I know that she said she was terrified because they had a performance, and they said luckily they had their scripts in hand because a lot of people struggled with memorizing at this point in their life. So are there theater games, acting lessons, memorized things? How does the whole thing look like for that age?
Well, I can speak to how it's looked like in the past, but it really depends on who's in the room. And now that Kaia's taking over, it'll also change, inevitably change the facilitation technique, because we all come with our different like backgrounds and specialities. But you're right. The great thing about devised theatre, it sort of takes away that pressure of memorization in some ways, because you're bringing something that you've created into the space. And so it's not memorizing somebody else's lines necessarily, but it's creating within the, so somebody might not be great at memorizing, but they may be incredible at movement, in which case maybe they have they're included in that way. So we're able to bring, to really address the strengths of everybody in the room. But you're right to say that it's nerve-wracking. I think it's the same for the teenagers as well that we work with. I did the teen ensemble during April break last year, and then Kaia's taking it over for the April break this year. And they also come with a lot of like, who's watching us, who's in the room, who's, you know, what's happening. And you have to, so your first day, your first sessions are inevitably about ensemble building and just letting people, just developing trust within the group, because we can't create anything without that kind of level of trust, and just feeling out what people want to do, who's comfortable speaking, who wants to pull back a little bit more, how you can draw people out. And that happens fairly organically through a series of theatre games. And if you've been doing this for long enough, you have enough games and exercises to pull out of your back pocket that it just creates a flow and hopefully a comfortable atmosphere that everybody can engage in. And if people don't, it's not for everybody. Devised theatre can be nerve-wracking in its own way. And as Kaia mentioned, if it's not for you, then you step away and you find some other way to engage with WAM or with creativity in a different way. But I'm amazed at how many talents we're able to incorporate and how many different personality types we're able to incorporate with this kind of work. It really is welcoming.
Do you do a production, if you will, at the end?
Generally not with that. We often do a sharing or a presentation, really to see how it develops. Sometimes I've found when we have had the pressure of production, and we've done that, we did that initially with the ensembles. The idea was, because we're primarily a production company, so that was inevitably where our minds went, oh, well, we'll create something and then we'll tour it and we'll do it. And we did some really great productions that way. But what happens is the devising atmosphere in the room and the creativity and the trust that you build when you get into a production process. For any of you've worked in theater, it's a totally different beast, and all of a sudden there's a pressure of like shaping things and cutting people's monologues and making people remember entrances and exits and pulling in tech and it just changes the level of it. So for the past couple of years, we've tried, like, what happens if we really center the process and then see what happens in terms of sharing after that, and center just the space of creativity first. But we will certainly let you know if we are presenting at any point, right, Kaia?
Absolutely. And that's something that I'm really interested in seeking feedback from the artist, from the devisers about as we go. My experience with other companies like Survivor Theater Project is that really ongoing and open communication along the way, and at certain junctures around whether it's going to be an invite only, whether it's a public performance, whether it will potentially go to one or multiple venues, like that's all can become part of the trust building within an ensemble.
I love that. Don't you, Ellen? Devisers.
Yeah. Are there certain themes that you've seen in the past that kind of lend itself to that age group of women working together? Are there certain topics that the women tend to bring to the table to work on?
I mean, in the past, it's very broad. That people come working with this age group was just an incredible privilege, because they're bringing this incredible wealth of experience and stories and skills, honestly. And the story swaps that we had were, I mean, it was just an incredible privilege to be in that room. And so the themes were incredibly widespread. I found in the past that starting with a theme or a question or a provocation in some kind gives everybody something to center in on. So we have done that in the past. We did the theme of justice, which is very broad, but asked everybody to bring something in and to start us off. And then we that was the theme that we sort of pulled around as we created something together. We've done other themes. We did themes with the teenagers before on body image. And again, these sort of really broad and open themes that people can like, or being mislabeled, that they can, but as far as are there specific themes that older artists work on more, I can't say that there is specifically anymore, because because everybody had such diverse experiences and life stories that they were bringing, that there wasn't a specific thing. Yeah.
Do you specifically also reach out to the to minority communities, because so much of theater looks like the four of us? Mm-hmm. And bringing in voices of folks who don't look like us is so important, as you well know. I mean, that's part of your mission. So I'm wondering if there's a specific outreach to more of the underserved community.
Yeah, I can take that on. Thank you. I'm so grateful that you're asking this question. I think it needs to be asked more and more of every space that we're creating, artistically, in terms of community. And I think that there are different dimensions that I want to touch on. One is that I'm really interested in building long-term relationships with not only individuals, but also organizations who serve individuals across different identities and life experiences. And that's something that WAM has been very intentional about doing in terms of collaborating with organizations like Bridge, which is an incredible organization in the area doing so many things related to anti-oppression and mutual aid. And we're cultivating a connection with another incredible organization named Manos Unidas, which just does incredible multicultural organizing and community building across genres of organizing. And so I think that part of I'm really interested in taking the long view to this, which is that we're wanting to build organic and authentic connections across years. And so I believe that sometimes it takes time for some relationships to necessarily like give way to an artistic collaboration specifically, but that's not the only kind of collaboration. There's also showing up at a community event or an activist event or a mutual aid event and just supporting what's already happening within a given community. There are also artistic and cultural events happening within minority communities that we can also be showing up for, where those spaces are being cultivated. And so yes, like we are so excited to be welcoming folks across life experiences and identities. And also, I think that the approach to that, to do so with authenticity, takes a lot of time and relationship building. And yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Talya.
That was beautiful. No, I agree. I mean, we are we're in the long game, as Kaia was mentioning. It's there are, when you announce something like this, there are people who feel more comfortable in those spaces, and they tend to be in Lennox anyway. It tends to be a older white audience. Which isn't to say that we don't have relationships with older people of color. And it just takes a lot to enter that space. And so, yes, we're looking at how to invite people in authentically as well. But starting, as Kaia mentioned, by going to and volunteering for and being at their different creative spaces and
Showing up.
Organizations. Yeah, showing up.
And also, oh, go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, and also allowing ourselves to be inspired by and changed by what we're witnessing that's being created by women of color, by communities of color, and to truly be informed as we create this opportunity and as we create the next one. I think being in a dynamic relationship of co-learning will help us to create containers that are more and more inclusive as well.
We did do, we ran a People of Color ensemble, which was an intergenerational ensemble. Unfortunately, it started just when COVID hit, so it ended up being online and had a limitation because of that. But there was a call at that point, especially for a sort of affinity space where people across the Berkshires creative people across the Berkshires could meet together. But the facilitators of that were our teaching artists were of color, because it's a space, it's an affinity space, right? So if Kaia and I show up to lead it, that automatically creates a weird dynamic. Yeah. And then slowly bringing these groups together and building trust.
That's wonderful. I'm going to take a quick moment to remind everyone of our Green Room sponsorship, and actually a beautiful segue because Chris Foster and Patrick White, a lot of our listeners have heard their names. They show up to so many things, talk about supporting our community and diversity. They go to student productions, they go everywhere. And Harbinger is their company, and they are doing the Agony running from December 8th through the 17th at the WAM Theatre in collaboration with Union College. So check that out. It's going to be amazing, as all their shows are.
Interesting collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder also, Talya and Kaia, And clearly, WAM Theatre was crafted, as you said at the outset, for women to have an opportunity to see themselves in these roles of as lead players. I'm wondering if some gents have knocked on the door, gents over the age of 65, and said, could we play too?
Not yet, actually. I have to say, no, not yet. We did for the teen ensemble asked us, they were originally the girls ensemble. They asked us to change the name specifically because of, they didn't all identify as girls and they wanted to be more inclusive. So then we had to have the conversation of how do we open up, but still not center female stories or female narratives, or at least make sure that they're not undermined in the process. And they were able to do that very successfully. I think they're the generation that have this, the gender spectrum a lot more open. They're just a lot more open and willing to embrace that, those stories and think about underrepresented voices. The elder ensemble so far, we've only, correct me if I'm wrong, Kaia, but I think we've only had female identified people show up. So that hasn't happened yet. I do believe, I'd have to look this up, or maybe your listeners can look it up, but I do believe there's something very similar for men that somebody sent me a link for. I can't remember where it was, but they're like, you should be, as soon as we announced this, people were sending me like, this will be interesting to you, about elder theatres, companies and creativity. But I think there are some things out there already, and I would just encourage them to do their own. I mean, what we're doing is not rocket science. I think that we can, like, other people can do this. It's not like we have the monopoly. Yeah.
Well, and I think at the time of our episode, we tend to wrap up with a very quick rapid fire question about just you two specifically. So this is our close-up segment. So Talya and Kaia, are you ready for your close-ups?
Sure. What does that even mean?
What have I signed up for?
We didn't tell you this, we don't tell anybody when we book them. I just, and as we move to this, just to remind that Talya is the Associate Artistic Director. You previously were the co-facilitator for the Elder Ensemble.
Right.
So that's the wealth of knowledge there. As you say, you've been handing this off to Kaia, who is now the community Director of Community Engagement and for WAM and facilitating the Elder Ensemble. So just so we know what your hats are now, before Ellen proceeds with the close-up.
Yeah, so I'll start with Kaia. What was the moment in your life where you just knew I have to be involved with theater?
Oh, okay. So it was third grade. We were reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I think the character's name is Veronica, who's just like the spoiled brat, who's just always saying like, I want it. And I really wanted to play her like on a big stage and declare wanting something. That's what I knew.
Have you ever had a chance to play it?
Oh, only in like telling the story, actually. Maybe I need to start auditioning again.
Talya, how about you?
Yeah, I was really lucky to grow up. My mum's a visual artist, and my grandmother loved theatre, and they took me to live art. So I remember just being captivated. They took me to a lot of dance, especially, and I remember being just captivated by what people's bodies can do on the stage. So yeah, it's had my imagination ever since then.
Is there a certain production or play that you've read, seen, been a part of that has had a major impact on your life? And can you tell us a little bit about why? Kaia, we'll start with you.
Oh, wow. Downloading. Okay. Vagina Monologues was incredibly impactful for me. I saw it in my first year of college. Oh, maybe I acted in it. And it, oh, wow. I think it just opened my eyes to the healing that's available when people tell vulnerable, stigmatized stories.
Love it.
That's a really hard one to rapid fire at somebody who reads plays for a living. But I will say that the first play that came to my mind, so I'll just go with that, was Angels in America, was Tony Kushner's Angels in America, that the epic scope of that play, and I had worked for a long time in AIDS education through theatre. And something about the scope of it and the way that it encompassed everything, but through the personal, was just, it still is magnetic to me.
And real quickly, last one, because we're running out of time, but Kaia, what would you say to a teenager or a senior citizen who is thinking about doing one of the programs that says, I don't know about this theater thing? What would you say to them?
I'd say let's have a conversation. What story do you want to tell? What story don't you want to tell? And that's totally okay too. And what supports your creativity? What supports your voice?
And Talya?
I would say go for it. I think that there's something really brave in jumping into the unknown and being with people in company and telling stories in company that is incredibly healing, incredibly impactful. And but it's like jumping into the pool, right? You have to try it. So I would just say go for it.
And the
Everybody has a
same
story
way
to tell.
right, is to jump in feet first, not head first.
Depends how good a swimmer you are.
I'm a fan of the belly flap.
And that's okay too. Sometimes the belly flop gets the biggest applause.
Indeed it does.
You know, but ladies, thank you so very much. The Elder Ensemble at WAM Theatre, Kaia Jackson, now the facilitator, Talya Kingston, formerly the facilitator, but both up to their elbows in the productions and the success of WAM Theatre. And you'll keep us posted so we can let folks know if they're interested in signing on, giving it a whirl, and just knowing that this work is going on and being supported, and a place for voices of a different generation. Too often in this country, as you well know, once you cross a certain age, the voices are drowned out or not listened to. And bravo for giving them such a stage to be heard and respected and revered. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And for our listeners, check out our Facebook page. We'll post all about WAM and everything they're doing, all the wonderful work there. And make sure you get to see Harbinger Theater's The Agony and the Agony. Free preview, free theater is always what I love, is December 7th. And you can catch it otherwise December 8th through the 17th at the Ullman Theater at Union College.
Ladies, again, thanks so very much. Everybody, thank you for joining us for this edition of Everything Theater. I'm Benita Zahn.
And I'm Ellen Cribbs. We'll catch you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything, everything.